Well, Shabbat Shalom to all my family and friends. It's good to be here. What a blessing from Abba. Give us an opportunity to come back and share with you. Again, this is Torah Talks with Tony and Bill. I'm Tony, and this is Bill, better known as Papa B to me, and Rabbi Son to some of you. We're going to dive right into this. There's so much information that we want to share. Hopefully, we'll get into some of the things that we talked to you about the last time we was here. We wanted to talk about the areas of operation, and hopefully we'll be able to get into that. But if not, we want to at least start flowing in that direction. So when we started talking about this mass circumcision, this global ecclesiastical circumcision, one of the things that Papa B did is, and he's good at it, is put together just a synopsis, just some information to help clarify some of the verbiage that we're using in terms of the circumcision. He put together this, and I'm going to read a little bit of it, and then we're going to get into this message a little deeper. Don't forget to pray for our country and those who are affected by the decisions we make in this country. I think we told you last time that because of the responsibility of a free world, we're called a model before the entire world what freedom should look like, and we're grateful to Abba that he shows us mercy and grace and gives us the stage to model that what true freedom really is. And so Mol and Orla is where Papa B began to introduce the concept of circumcision, or even the definition of it a little bit. And I'll read a little bit of this, and I'll let him again just kind of reintroduce the concept, and then I want to read to you something that's going to cause us to flow right into where we want to go today. So mol, to cut, as in to prune or to fade or peel back or trim, to cause to diminish with a sharp object, to cut off at the point in order to smooth out. And I want to come back to that sharp object, cutting with the sharp object. And then orla, foreskin, excess flesh, and we talked about that a little bit. Wild growth, as in trees that need to be pruned, or excess limbs. Stammering, as in lips that utter excess sounds. That sharp object, when I saw that, when I was looking over the outline, I thought about the word of God, sharper than any two-edged sword. I thought about that, and I thought this is an awesome picture as we head into the circumcision not made with hands, not made by man, not performed by the hands of man. This circumcision, when I think of the word of Abba and how his word is utilized to implement this circumcision or to operate on our lives, I think about our process. And we talked about our process. My process had a lot to do with how I respond to the word of God. So when we was in your home, a lot of beautiful messages came out of that. And we didn't necessarily come there for Bible study. You know, that wasn't what we didn't leave home saying, I'm going to Bill's house for Bible study. We were coming to your house to continue an encounter that was causing a renewal to take place in our heart. And within that encounter, or part of that, we were receiving the word of Abba. I need you to talk a little bit more about Mol and Orla before we get into this flow of circumcision not made by hands.
The first word is Mol, and it as Tony read the definition, it's to prune or to fade, cause something to fade, like a haircut. You know, they talk about the fades these days. It's to peel back, to come to, or cause to diminish. You know, Yohanan John said, I must decrease in order that he may increase. It's this concept of stepping back, restraining. Pruning is such an important thing. Mul, the idea of mul is that everything that the Creator made can grow one of two ways. It can grow according to his plan, according to its purpose, and according to its ingrained potential. Or it can grow wild. It can grow in such a way and move in such a way that it actually defeats the purpose, is counterproductive, causes harm instead of blessing. And so this issue of pruning, God is in a constant state of pruning us. And he does it because he wants the growth that is in us to be a blessing to the world, to be a source of fruitfulness, of joy, and of hope. And so he's constantly looking at us in ways in which he can apply the sharp object, the sharp point, to our lives in such a way as to make them more productive and beautiful and less harmful and toxic to other people. And that is really the idea. What does the Word of God have to do with it? First of all, I think to realize how important this is, think for a second of something nobody talks about, which is, why does God speak in the first place?
Right.
I mean, what is he doesn't have to talk, you know? He's not in needy of expressing himself. So what is his purpose in giving voice, drawing breath, releasing breath, forcing it into syllables, forcing it into words, forcing it into phrases that have his essence, his power into it? He is still creating. Everything he does, he did created by this word, by his words. He is still creating by his words. Now, the issue is, what does he want his words to do? Once they hit the earth, and once they hit individuals like you or like me or like the people who are watching this video right now, once they begin to settle somewhere and they circle the earth and they do what they do and they bring the energy of heaven into this earth, what does he expect that to do? It's not just we get more intelligent. This is not a factor of information of the masses or of our individual beings. It's not about improving our theologies. It's not about improving our, what we call halakha in Hebrew, or orthodoxy, you might think, in the terms of Christianity. It's not about improving that. What it's about is pruning us so that individually and collectively as a people, and this whole word that you've given about the mass circumcision starts with the phrase, the church.
The church.
And the idea, we could go into long detail, which I won't do, about what that means and what that implies.
Sure.
But the key is that what God is doing, he has a certain group of people that he is desiring to take into the pruning process at this phase, at this stage, at this moment. And as he's doing this pruning, he's going to use his words, because his words are the tools he uses to take off the rough edges, to take off the sharp points that make us toxic and painful to other people to be around, and to begin to release the life force of who he is and what he has to do. So his word is the energy, it is the power, and it is the sharp blade that does what needs to be done. Think of him as a surgeon, and he has a scalpel, and his word is a scalpel. And when I say his word, I'm talking about every facet of his words. His creation and its imagery, the stars, the heavens, the clouds, the atmosphere, the mountains, the valleys, that is his word. So also, obviously, is the Torah and the prophets and the writings and the Brit Hadashah. These are his word, especially when it says, and the Lord said. Those are special parts of his word. He has different scalpels, different blades on his scalpel, I should say, for things. And then also the prophetic voice. If it is itself pruned, if it is itself in tune with the Creator, it also then becomes one of the tools, or the sharpening tools that used for the mul, for the cutting, or the cutting away of the flesh. And you want to talk about orla?
Yes, orla. Yes.
Orla is what is cut. Orla is the excess flesh. It actually is a term from agriculture. I think we mentioned this the other day. It's from agriculture. It's that excess growth on a tree or on a bush that you need to cut off in order for the bush to be full and fruitful. What is he cutting in us? And I guess that's going to be the segue or the transition into why is he doing this now? What does he want to accomplish? What parts of us is he aiming at? What aspects of our being is he directing his scalpel toward? And what's going to happen as a result?
One of the things that, as you was talking about from the agricultural standpoint, the pruning concept and how a tree can be fruitful, but the pruning of that tree makes it even more fruitful. It brings forth an abundance, correct? So I was thinking about, and then I'll go through this summary real quick. I was thinking about my own life and how since there's been specific attention on this concept of circumcision, how even my life has started to undergo a deeper sense of that. Well, I knew it was happening because I said it was. I knew it was happening. But then I start seeing fruit. I start seeing the results. And what I mean by that is, I'm a passionate person. And sometimes when things are said to me by individuals, without that circumcision, without that pruning, sometimes my reaction is not what it should be. My reaction is it can sometimes be dangerous to the individual that's releasing information. So some things happen, that happens all the time, in my life and in my work and the business that I do. And so, and normally my heart starts racing, I get activated, and my internal systems are activated, and I'm in fight or flight mode at that point. Well, this time, same things happening, right? Same things happening in the world, same things happening. I'm hearing the same news. I'm hearing everything's the same. But I notice a different response in my own life. I notice a calmness. I notice a peace that was there that regulated my system, hearing the same things, right? Even sometimes things that sound accusatory, things that I feel that I'm being accused of. I felt the same attacks, right? From, just from human experiences, but my reaction was different. This time I was able, through Abba, to think, to take some time before responding, and to respond compassionately, right? I'm hearing the individuals and I'm seeing beyond those words. I'm seeing beyond those conversations. And I think that has a lot to do with the mul and the ola. I believe this was a cutting away that was taking place, and the results was those things that I would normally respond to that way. The impact of circumcision was now showing itself. When you say the excess flesh. So the summary that you gave was cutting away of excess flesh, self-denial. That played a major role in me being able to respond with compassion, right? Respond from a place of mercy, respond from a place of love, instead of me also responding in an accusatory way and turning back and saying, well, there are things in your life that's not perfect either. You want to go there. But no, those things didn't come up. My heart didn't start racing. That was major to me, because normally, even if from the exterior perspective, I don't look as if I'm activated. I am activated, and I sense it, and I feel my heart beat, and I feel myself stimulated. None of that. My heart rate was the same. I wasn't stimulated. My thoughts didn't go crazy. And I was able to listen to the person, right? And hear the actual person versus maybe what was coming out of their mouths. The other thing was surrender. And I'm going to have you touch on this next one. Surrender, putting down of arms, agendas, and ideas at odds with the king's plan. That's another whole picture. And one of the things I remember us talking about is this denial and this surrendering is for a greater purpose, right? And we've got to be able to do that for the bigger picture, for the plan of God. This next one, branding, is what I want you to talk about a little bit, because I understand vulnerability. Instant availability was one of my favorites. Laying aside of every burden, and then the testimony of presence, emergence, coming out of neshama, not like animal flesh, nefesh. But this branding, talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, one of the purposes of circumcision is to mark you. This is in the physical realm. I mean, and so that, and I know we have people in the great scheme that may be listening to this that have different ways of looking at life in general. So when you say things like we say things like circumcision,
right.
There are literalists out there.
That's correct.
And there are visionaries and dreamers out there. There's all sorts of different people,
right.
And we need you all.
Right.
We want you all. the world needs you all. God created you all.
Mm-hmm.
So, but understand when we're talking about it, in these conversations we're talking about, the circumcision is one of those vocabulary words the Creator has thrown out there at this particular stage, not to get you thinking concrete terms of how you're going to physically cut yourself.
Sure.
It's the idea of how He is going to trim your excess flesh and put you back into this state. Now, one of the aspects of physical circumcision, however, that we enter into is a branding. Once you're circumcised, you're branded. I mean, I won't get too detailed, but everybody knows if you're in a locker room, you know, it's no secret. Now, the point of the circumcision is to be different and know you're different, and know you're not better, you're just different, and you have a responsibility to walk in accordance with this thing that has happened inside of your flesh, this mark that has been made upon you, this pruning that has taken place. And I think of it, you know, I'm going to give you an example that tends to apply this to me. It worked in my life. It was my personal experience. As a young father of young children, my feeling was that, you know, I had to be right all the time, and I had to tell them what was right and what was wrong, and I had I should react in a certain way and do certain things because everything had to be right, and I had to fix it if it wasn't. And at a certain stage, I began to notice that if I reacted negatively to my children when they misbehaved or when they had problems, or if I yelled at them, or if I just frowned at them, even if I stared at, you know, gave them the look, the look, you know, even if I gave them the look, they would wilt or they would react in a negative way. My wife could do that all the time, you know, but there was something unique to who I was and the fatherhood that God had called me, that I didn't have the right to get into their world and behave the way that other people would be normal to behave. I was supposed to be a transcender, one above that, who saw past the present, saw past the difficulty, saw past the dirt and the filth, saw past the bad attitude, and saw the potential in the person. And so the father, as the father, I learned I had to gradually, unfortunately, painfully sometimes, I learned I don't have the right to be angry. I am supposed to have a whole nother mission in this process, and I don't have the right to demand that they be perfect and do what I want them to do. My job is to cultivate beauty in them and bring forth fruit in them, knowing they've got a process to walk out, and part of it's going to be ugly. Obviously, my job was to keep them from killing each other. Beyond the killing each other process, the idea is, okay, not to make decisions and get involved in their fights back and forth and their squabbles, but instead to love them through that and encourage them to take different avenues than they were presently taking. Now, why does that got to do with branding? Branding is acceptance of the Father's brand upon your life. It is accepting that you have a certain call to nobility, a certain call to shalom, a certain call to simcha, which is joy, delight, a certain call to a long-term vision as opposed to a short-term reaction, and that being your brand, because it's His brand. It's His brand. It means that our flesh now in every situation is to be pruned back, peeled back, such that we can actually be a force, an energy, a light into our world, family, workplace, education, every sphere of influence we have. And this is to wear the brand. And so when I say the circumcision that we're talking about has a branding aspect to it, it will mark us as different. Not because we're better, because we have been given this sign that we are nobility, and as nobility, our responsibility is to bring forth the best in everyone around us, not to condemn them for the bad stuff that they're doing now.
Bring out the best in everybody else. That's, you know, when I think about again, my process, and listening to the purpose in which circumcision is given to us. Why did Abba release this? Why is this process even necessary? And that is because, through life, through our experience, through our culture, we take on flesh, and we continue to take it on year after year, time after time.
Like fingernails, they keep growing.
Yes, keep growing, and regardless of you cutting them back, they keep growing. I remember when we, as a family, my family, myself, your family, we were getting ready to go to Africa, and I had that dream, and to just cut it really short, the dream was about really getting rid of excess flesh. I was shedding all these garments, all these cultural things, but when those things were finally to the point to where they no longer impact my pace, right? Now my pace had picked up. I could keep up with what Abba was saying. Then I became responsible for helping other people in that same process. What I remember about that is when we came back from South Africa, I really didn't know what happened. It really wasn't as pleasant of an experience for me as I remember your wife teasing me all the time about how miserable I was over there. But when I came back, a lot of things began to take place that I started understanding what that trip was about, what those experiences was about. But it wasn't just about that. That was a part of a long process, right? It's still ongoing. But the key is the circumcision, and I'll read this, not made with hands, the circumcision of Messiah, right? That's what was taking place. And that's where the Torah is going to take us in this passage. He's going to get a little deeper into what that circumcision. Now, they were already experiencing the circumcision, the mark, the branding. He's going to now give voice to what that circumcision was about and what it is about today, and the progression of that. So it's in Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 16. He says, so circumcise the foreskin of your, and this is amplified version, minds and hearts. Be no longer stubborn and hardened. He says, for the Lord your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, the great, the mighty, the terrible God, who is not partial and takes no bribes. He executes justice for the fatherless and for widows, and loves the stranger or temporary resident, and gives him food and clothing. Therefore, love the stranger and sojourner, for you were strangers and sojourners in the land. He can go on and on. But the key is, he says, so circumcise the foreskin of your hearts, mind, hearts. Be no longer stubborn and hardened. I need you to talk about that, because he starts, before he says, be no longer stubborn and hardened, he says, circumcise the foreskin of your heart. Then be no longer stubborn and hardened.
We don't have it in ourselves with our flesh in place to do the things that we're called to do, to become the influence and the impactful people that we're called to do. So there has to be something. That's why he's calling the mass ecclesiastical circumcision at this stage in this hour of time, because we have grown this excess flesh. The church has grown a significant amount of excess flesh, and the primary area in which the growth has taken place is in the heart and the mind. And just as it says in your Amplified there, the heart and the mind has become flesh-oriented, flesh-motivated, flesh-obsessed, and therefore flesh-polluted.
Yes.
And so what there has to be, this idea of circumcising of the heart, starting with the heart and the mind, is first of all to realize we are in the flesh.
Yes.
That is a critical, shocking realization to most of us, that most of the things in our minds, let's start with that first, most of the things that we think and believe, most of the things that we ruminate on, most of the things that we cogitate on, converse about, are flesh. It's like, seriously? And the answer is, I'm sorry, yes. Don't you see it? If you just open your eyes, you'll see it. what about the feelings? What about what we feel? What the essence of us we think we are? And we label ourselves with flesh labels. I won't go into some of those flesh labels now. We label ourselves with ethnic labels. We label ourselves with ideological labels. These are all flesh labels. This is not who we are. We are children of the King.
Yes,
you know,
we are.
Those other things are things that our flesh has divided us by. And we tend to want to segregate ourselves by or separate ourselves unto. And he says, okay, the first shock that you happen to come to your system is you got way too much flesh in all these areas, and it starts with your heart. And it starts with your mind. So I'm going to have to do a work, and you're going to have to cooperate with me, because he says you will circumcise, because you see he's moving your hand. And he's providing the blade with the scalpel of his word. So we're to cooperate with his word. Take that as our scalpel, and now begin to go in and start evaluating what about our heart and what about our mind? What about the way we approach life and approach each other and even consider about ourselves? What needs to be cut? What needs to be cut away, not just so that we can get rid of it, so that we can actually become the beautiful people, the powerful people, the impactful people that we were created to be. So yes, the circumcision of the heart is cooperation with the hand and with the words of God, letting him direct you to the places of your heart and your mind, particularly to start with. That heart. Once this happens, he says, I'm not telling you, I'm just cutting. I'm not just cutting. I am releasing. And so when you see the other things that take place after that verse that you read, and you start seeing, therefore, that you would do it and love the neighbor, and love your foreigner, love the foreigner, and all these different things that we're going to see, that we actually can, the capacity to love is dependent upon us getting the flesh out of our heart. The capacity to speak wisdom is dependent upon us having cut away the flesh of our own thinking and our own minds. Our own ideologies, our own ideas, our own concepts, our own belief system, our own matrix, to be able to get heaven's matrix and then begin to release it. That's the secret of the circumcision. And our part in it is to cooperate with it and let him have his way. And let him direct his words to the parts of our mind and heart to start with that we're engaged.
Oh, my goodness. So something that's, I kind of want to just release this to you real quick. So when he was talking, and he was talking about circumcision is not just cutting away, pulling back, it is, but it's also releasing. So I want to say to you that this process that we're undergoing, sometimes it is painful. Sometimes it's a little scary because of what he's cutting back. But it's also to release you, right, into the person and into the prophetic destiny that Abba has called you to. So these people had a land to inherit. They had a place to grow and to develop. They had a call in their lives, a responsibility to model on the stage of humanity what God's covenant was supposed to look like with his people. And so God wasn't just cutting away just to cut away, but it wasn't just about separating these individuals, but it was releasing these individuals. And so when I see the cutting away, I see the releasing of a people, right? So this mass circumcision that we're talking about is taking place because it is time to release his people, right? And so I want to just share that with you, that it's time. Abba is ready to release you into your prophetic destiny, into the places that he's called you to model, and to do that, there has to be this has to take place. This cutting away has to take place. And again, as though it may be painful at times, and though it's scary because of the things that are cutting away and things we've become accustomed to, it's necessary to release you into your prophetic destiny.
And when you say it has to happen, and it needs to happen, and it's necessary.
Yes.
All of which I totally agree with.
Yeah.
I will honestly say it doesn't have to. We don't have to do this. If we don't, we will get more of the status quo. We will continue to be frustrated and anxious and worried and upset, and we'll obsess about politics and ideology and ethnic differences between us, It will fight over all sorts of historical hurts and wounds and scars. It will always talk about stuff that doesn't matter, and
Yes.
we'll have little enclaves where we go to meet every so often and pretend we're doing something important.
Mhm.
And that will be the status quo. That's why I say I agree with you totally.
Yes.
It's necessary.
Yes.
We need
Right.
to do
Right.
this.
the and hopefully once we get to, because there's a passage you have here that talks about what happens with the uncircumcised, right? And so you're right, we really want to do this because again, this is how we're released, right? As we close, again, pray for our country and those who are affected by the decisions we make in this country. I want to introduce just this really quick book to you. We'll have tools from time to time that we want to introduce to you that helped us along our process. This is the Garden of Gratitude. I want you to, if you need information on this, just let us know. You can just ask us on the post. If you want to outline the same outline that Papa B and I are looking at, you can ask for it and we'll send it to you. But I want you to be introduced to the Garden of Gratitude. Listen, Shabbat Shalom to all my family and friends.